Hello and welcome to the next tour with
Ian.
and Andia. We are so happy to be here on episode 24, Transition and Taxes. This is one
Mm.
I've been kind of excited about because it's the one that I'm most scared of. Today we have Attiyya Ingram with us, a good friend and a tax professional, a financial counselor who is actually also a military spouse and has been for 25 years, married to her active duty Marine husband. And Attiyya, welcome. We're super happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here with you guys. I love what you're doing.
Thanks so much.
Mhm.
And we love what you're doing too, because, as Andy had mentioned, we're here to talk about taxes. Now, taxes, some people love them, some people hate them.
Wait, who
They,
loves them?
Yeah.
okay.
I need to know.
Some people love
Tia? No.
working with them.
There
How's
you
that?
go.
Yeah. And helping clients and people make sure that they pay them right. So let me caveat that, right? But at the end of the day, taxes can be surprising for a lot of people, both good and bad,
Mhm.
particularly when you talk about a military transition. We were surprised in a lot of ways, both how much we were going to pay and some of the benefits, based off of things like disability and what states, do for, veterans and things of that nature. So, but before we kind of dive into that, would you mind sharing a little bit about your background and how you got into this space?
Yeah, absolutely. So my undergraduate degree from Hampton University is in accounting. So that's kind of the bedrock. I always felt like, I love numbers. My original intent was to be an accountant for the FBI. Like I wanted to be an
Ooh,
FBI
Ooh.
agent, right? But
nice.
then I met my Marine guy.
Yeah.
So you know how that story ended, right?
All plans
Find the
change. Yeah.
answer later. So,
Totally.
as we do, I had to pivot and figure out, well, what can I do with this degree as a military spouse? At the time, we were in Okinawa, and I realized, hey, I like talking about, all things money related, and I learned about the AFC fellowship and applied for that. So that started that journey. As a part of that credential, you have to get hours, related to it. And I started volunteering at a tax center in Stuttgart, Germany. By that time, we had PCS. Uh, and I don't want to say love, right? But I did love doing people's taxes. And then I was like, "Oh, this probably could be a career. Like, I could probably make this into something." And so here I am. Of course, this was 15 years ago when, remote and all of that was not the thing, so I kinda had to build this framework for myself that would work with his active duty career, but I've managed to do it successfully, and so here I am, and it's been wonderful.
Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, and being able to really dive in and build that business model, particularly focused around, the customers that you started to serve, military families. That's incredible. And being able to provide that service as a business model today, very successful. I can see, your logo on your shirt and in the
Yes,
background,
yes.
Ingram Financial Management. That's wonderful. We're really, really excited for you to continue to dive into this with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, e- every tax situation is different. Military families, of course, their lives can be really complex, even, have different houses in different states. And I can only imagine what it looks like or what you've seen over the years too with different families. So, I guess as we start this off, like what are some of the common challenges you see with veterans or families? And especially obviously during transition, and how can they avoid those maybe challenges?
Right, absolutely. And you guys alluded to it earlier. One of the biggest challenges is, we go from receiving a lot of non-taxable pay while we're on active duty, right? Particularly BAH, that's the basic housing, allowance. That really is a huge part of our monthly income when we're active duty. And so just that being gone alone makes a big difference. And so, and those who transition out and maybe get a civilian job, like you even,
Hmm.
you're also working a civilian job. Or for a lot of families now, the spouse is able to earn a sizable income where we're not always in the situation, to be like a high income earner during those active duty years. So that combination really can catapult people in transition into a much higher tax bracket. So, a little bit of a sticker shock, and they're just not prepared. The W-4, which is the withholdings form we all have to fill out when we get a new job, it has also changed. And so it's no longer like people were used to, oh, I'm married with, three dependents, and you just put M3 done, and magically it all works out. Well, now it's a little bit different. And so it takes some math. Maybe you have to do it a few times to really find how much you need to be withholding for your new tax situation, especially as a veteran where you had, a portion of your pension is probably taxable. You have your job, your spouse has their job potentially. So it's a lot going on. And what I find is that most veterans, especially that first, 24 to 48 months out, they're just under withholding and have this huge sticker shock during that first or second tax season where they're paying 5 figures easy because
Mm,
under withheld, and you pay a penalty. I mean, the IRS, they're
Yeah.
gonna pile on, right? And so, completely avoidable, but it does take time. Any transition we go through, right? We're vulnerable no matter what it is in life. And that's usually a time where you wanna talk to the experts, and you don't have to talk to them continuously, but those are the moments where you wanna reach out and say, "Hey, am I looking at this right? Can you help me
mhm.
understand? Help me do the numbers?" A lot of veterans think about it. They're not even used to looking at a pay stub. It looks very different than the LES that, we've come accustomed to on the active side. So little things like that where you just have somebody, just take a look at it and help you understand it, make sure your numbers align because that is very difficult, right? For people, especially during transition where you're paying a lot anyway. You probably bought your forever home, and oftentimes that's when the kids are headed out to college. Things are happening.
Yeah.
It's just that time of life,
Yeah.
right? And then you get this five-figure bill from the IRS and maybe even the state, right? Depending on where you land, and
Right.
that is not a good thing. So if that and it can be avoided. So that's one of my biggest, areas where I see people kind of falling into that under withholding situation. And you know, let's try to avoid that. Let's get the word out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember when Ian transitioned the first year, so in 2024, we were doing our taxes for 2023. Everything was going swimmingly because he had a nice clean cut on December 31st because
Perfect.
he retired on the 1st of January. So that made it mathematically a little easier, but we were like, "Oh, you know what? Let's go and look at a couple withholding calculators for what we're expected for 2024." And we were both like, we realized we were gonna be underpaying taxes
Well,
by, like,
Yeah.
$40,000 if we didn't make a change,
Mhm.
and we were absolutely shocked, and
Right.
so we added additional withholding to
federal
his
and state.
Yep, to his retired pay, to my pay, then to his filling pay, all 3 of them, and then we got a tax return for the first time because we didn't because clearly we didn't calculate it all correctly. We did not reach out to a professional. We thought, "We got this." I mean, but better to get a little kickback at the end of the year, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Than penalties.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, I love that the idea of reaching out to somebody, talking to them, using those tools, those calculators too were really helpful. It really opened our eyes.
And did you
Yeah.
use the IRS calculator by chance?
So we use the IRS one and
Good.
the AARP one
Excellent.
because they have a way that you can add in a pension. And so that calculator was really helpful. So I used both and they came up with the same similar
Pretty
numbers, which is why I was like, "Oh, this is actually real."
But that's
Yeah.
great that you thought, to do that, and obviously with your background, right, you knew enough that like, "Hey, a change is a coming, let me do some research." But yeah, the IRS tool is great. You can put in all that information, and it'll even generate a W-4 for you based on your input that you can then sign and give to your, civilian employer, HR. Very helpful.
Yeah, no kidding.
Mhm.
Those are excellent tips. And, we can link the IRS, calculator in our show notes for this episode. And of course, along with ways to get in touch with Attiyah for our viewers and listeners out there. So, we've told you a little bit about like, some of the surprises that we faced when we did our transition almost 2 years ago. So as you think about, the the transition that your family will eventually face at some point, what are some of the things that you all are looking at when it comes to, planning for tax changes that may or may not, surprise some of our guests? And, if you've got some of those examples, we'd love to be able to kind of hear about, what's on your mind as you face this pretty soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest things for us, as we transition, of course, one day, right? Nobody gets to stay in forever, is that we have a rental property. And so, like a lot of military families, we're renting out a home from a prior duty station. And well, of course, literally as we were unpacking into that house, he gets a call for orders for the next year. So we're
Of
like,
course.
"Oh, of course,"
Gosh.
like, and all.
Why not? Yeah.
You know? And so anyway, so we're, currently renting that home, and we're using the stop the clock provision, which the IRS allows for, military families, and a few other people in the intelligence communities kind of fall into that. But basically, we're permitted to rent our homes for 10 years while you're on active duty, and when you sell it, after that, and this is I'm just shortening it, we're not gonna go into the technicalities, but in short, when I sell it, after that 10-year window, I could still treat it as our personal residence, our primary residence, and I don't have to pay capital gains taxes on the
Mhm.
profit. So that's a huge part of our planning, trying to figure out, we wanna be watching when we reach, that window, and then once he retires from active duty, that stop the clock, begins to tick again, right?
Right.
The clock is only while you're active duty. So that's a huge consideration because, the provision allows you to exclude up to $500,000. I mean, that's $500,000 tax free, which that is like really, really great. That'll be really great for us.
Yeah, no kidding.
For
Yeah,
sure.
it really will help offset, like we talked about, that loss of BAH. And so for us, just because that's such a substantial part of his pay that we don't pay taxes on, we're just trying to create a situation where when he transitions, we can utilize the equity in the investment property the right way to potentially pay cash for that forever house so that it's pretty much a seamless transition. We lose the BAH, but hey, we don't have a mortgage. So ideally,
Right.
that's the goal. We'll see how close we get. I gotta keep working. There are other parts of it, right, that have to happen. But that's really like one of the biggest pieces. And a lot of landlords who are military and making that transition, just don't understand the timing of that. And you would hate to miss your timing because literally the IRS counts it to the day. Like you have to report it
Wow,
to
wow,
a day.
right.
And you don't want to be like, oh, if only I had known a week before closing, like
Yeah.
my
Gosh.
gosh, that'll bring tears to your eyes. So yeah, that's a big because it's a lot of money that we can make, right? If you decide to sell, and so that is probably the biggest financial, move we're gonna be making and trying to figure out what we want to do. Yeah, at
Yeah.
transition.
No, that's a big one, and you hit on a couple things that I think are important, right? The certainty of taxes. There's only other one certainty in this life, right? And it's
Eh,
it's the other side of it. But
yes,
that certainty aspect of it really is something that folks really need to pay attention to. They need to put the hard work in. They can't put it off. There are a few things that folks just shouldn't take a beat on and pause. They should make sure that they do their financial planning, and they should make sure that they work their disability claim through the VA,
absolutely.
to make sure that they're
Mhm.
taken care of on the back end. And I think those are two of the biggest things that folks get lost in. And so, your expertise and your insights on this are incredibly, incredibly valuable.
Thank you. My philosophy is always anytime, the IRS particularly has anything and it's free, like tax free, it's not a lot, right? But there are a very few things that allow you a tax free, benefit. And so we're in those areas, you really have to focus, right? And see how you can apply it to your situation and take advantage of it because it's just not a lot like the Roth IRA, right? It's like
Yeah.
that interest is tax free, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
those types of accounts we need to be taking full advantage of, right? Anytime in life because you can still do a
Mhm.
backdoor Roth even once your income,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
up. So just things like that where you're like, "Oh, you're giving me this free money," right? Like, what can I do to take advantage of it? And so that's what I try to help my clients, kind of get to that. Like, where are those free things we're missing and how can we maximize?
For sure. And I've had, accountant friends, tell me, "Hey, we're not in the business of tax evasion. We're in the business of tax avoidance." And being able to tap into those rules, those benefits, those aspects of what we can do to minimize that adjusted gross income and be able to maximize our dollar. Everybody needs to maximize their dollar,
Right.
for what's on the other side of military service.
Exactly.
So we want to enjoy it. We want to take a breath. We want to have a retirement. So these are all excellent tips. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm going to kind of throw this at you, so don't hate me. Ian, but Ian mentioned it at the beginning was state taxes, and I think that does kind of take people by. I mean, not necessarily by surprise. Like they know if they've claimed their domicile in a different state that's tax, the income tax is sheltered, like Florida or Texas.
Right.
They kind of know if they're retiring in Virginia or separating in Virginia, they're going to be paying taxes. But what would you tell people as they're planning, like thinking about different states and things like that? I mean, of course, people can do lots of research, but is there one good place to go to like compare state taxes, or just wondering if you've got any tips about any of that?
Right. I honestly, can't think of a consolidated place, where you would be able to get that type of information. Really, it's because, and most people are going to go where the job is. I mean, that's the reality of, where it is. Like most people still need to work when they transition from the military. So that's really the driver. Or,
Hmm.
the alternative would be, hey, I already know I want to be near family and I'm going to be
Hmm.
at work. So people are usually in either of those camps, right? And so they do know taxes are coming. I think what I see mostly is that they're not taking advantage, kind of like we just touched on before, of what their tax benefits are as a veteran in that state, right? So you have 100% disability, or some states it may even be 90. It doesn't have to be 100, right? So just what are the rules and what are you saying? Do you have to pay property taxes? On your car or your home, all of these different things that, I'm asking people, or I'll see like, hey, I get their mortgage statement that shows like Virginia that they've been paying property taxes. It's on their mortgage statement. And I know they're 100% disabled. So I'm like, why are you paying taxes? Well, they didn't know, right?
Never
So,
applied
yeah, they
for it,
never
right?
apply because you have to apply. And a lot of people assume, oh, well, I did my Virginia taxes, they think it's automatic. Well, no, it's not automatic. So, I mean, I know that people know is what I find that they do have to pay income tax. It's just a matter of they're missing that additional layer of benefits to really
Right.
Yes.
maximize their pension and their veteran benefits.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned a couple, right? You talked about the property tax on both like a vehicle, for example, and a home. You talked about income tax. Certain categories of sales tax, for example.
Yes,
That's another big one. I didn't have to pay sales tax on a new vehicle
right.
because of my disability rating, for example. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, you've got to do the
You
research
do.
and make it a habit and make it a hobby
Yes.
to find that out because it's only going to benefit
Yeah,
you,
and
right?
Yeah, if you don't wanna give the government extra
that's
money, do
right.
your research.
Exactly. Every state, you will have like a veteran um, tax office, just for veterans. And so that's where you would want to go and do your research and talk to people in that office to see, as a veteran in this particular state, because asking a buddy that lives in a different state, that's not going to help you prepare, for your family. So you want to do the research for your state and and it's there, and again, if it's confusing, because that is a time, right? We know during transition where it's a lot coming at you. It's a bit overwhelming, the information overload. And so reach out to a professional. That's what we're here for, to give advice and kind of help you navigate so you don't get lost in the weeds. And then because what happens, right? People get confused and then do nothing. And you
Mm,
Yes.
don't want that,
Yeah.
right? Because the
right,
overload causes people to do nothing. And so
right.
just ask the right people when you need the help, so that you can take action and save money. And we all have that same goal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So as parting thoughts here before we move to the next fun section, anything else that you really want? Like we didn't cover. I mean, I know we could talk about this for a lot
A lot.
longer, but
Yeah, I
but
love
any,
talking about money. I could go all day.
I know, honestly. But is there something you want to leave our guests with today?
Again, I think we all do a great job of, at this point, kind of talking to our, friends and family, fellow veterans, spouses about money and kind of transition and what's next. But I would say also, again, just talk to a professional as well, right? We know how important that is. We see a lot of veterans falling into scams,
Mm,
believing like their pension is tax free because a buddy at work said that their pension is tax free. And I can guarantee you, any payment you get from DFAS is not tax free. Like I don't need to look anything up. People send me all kind of like emails. Oh, but I got this from my friend at work, and he doesn't pay. Just because you told DFAS to not withhold does not mean you don't owe taxes. That's just you deciding you don't want to have taxes withheld from your pay, right? But that doesn't
my
mean you
God.
don't owe. And I just see that so much because we really rely on each other a great deal, right? To get information, but sometimes that over reliance and we all want to believe we don't owe, right? That everything is,
Yeah.
but just talk to a professional. Most of us, especially like people like me, I'm in the Military Tax Expert Alliance, things like that. I mean, we're all military affiliated and we have a heart for this community. We want to answer these questions
Hmm.
for you to avoid these huge tax bills and mistakes down the road. And again, like we talked about during transition, we're most vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's when we want to hone in and really get expert advice after we talk to our friends and kind of gather that basic information.
Well, that's perfect. I really love how you punctuate that aspect because that gets after exactly why we started this
Mhm.
podcast is to be able to provide resources that are factual, connect people with actual professionals who understand the business of whatever the veteran or their family are looking into. So I appreciate you really, really, flagging that for
Yeah.
us and our guests.
And thank you
So
guys for, just having this platform and giving us a space to educate this population. Yeah.
yeah,
That's my
it's definitely what we want to do.
Absolutely.
that's my ring doorbell. So
Love it. Love it. All
You
right.
know what?
Who's
Life
there?
never stops. That's for
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, as Andy alluded to, we'll cut over to the fun part of the podcast, and I'm going to ask you the first part about what's in your rucksack. And this can be something literal, it can be something figurative or philosophical. What's something that you want to carry with you out of your life in the military into when you guys transition as a family, and what do you want to get rid of when you make that transition and never look back?
Yeah, so it took me like 2 seconds to come up. It just popped right? So what
Yeah,
I
we always know.
yeah, what I wanna bring with me would be the sense of community and camaraderie that is just innate in the military, and I absolutely love that. And a lot of it is, of course, like, because the active duty side is pretty much on the same schedule, like when you're with a unit, you're doing stuff together. So it's like that built-in community. And I just love that. On the civilian side, like it is so difficult for me to connect with my friends, my civilian friends. Everybody's schedules are crazy. We live all over. But so I definitely would love to bring that, with me and keep that going. Just that ease of being able to come together just easily. Like, hey, I'm gonna just order a
Yeah.
pizza. Let's all meet at
Right.
this house. And, just what we do in the military
Yeah.
community, right? And so I love that and I hope to continue that. What I would love to get rid of and will get rid of, I'm not is that 5 o'clock alarm, so yeah, yeah. So, my husband's still active duty, so we're up at 5 o'clock, and I mean, we get a lot done in a day, which is good. But
Yes.
we're gonna leave
But by
the
8
alarm.
PM, you're like
Oh, let me tell you, yeah, we can't watch any shows in the evening because we're like what happened? We're those.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would love to shift it a little bit, and not have to get up so early and, at least 6, right? Let me 6, I think,
Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I could do.
Give me 6
Yeah.
a.m.
Oh, that's perfect. I love it. Thank you for
Yeah.
those. And you know what? We couldn't agree with you
Yeah,
more.
yeah. We definitely agree with that. Okay, so now I'm going to move us into the game portion of this called Two Truths and a Lie Military Style. And our last guest was Andrew Pauly. We got to talk to him because he was with Hire Heroes USA and did some career counseling with them and shared his story. It was really fun. But I'm going to give you his 3 facts. Well, you're going to have to figure out which 2 are the facts and which one is the lie here. Okay. He's a published author. 2, he traveled Cuba. And 3, he's been on a tour through the Midwest as a speaker.
I'm gonna say the lie is the tour in the Midwest as a speaker.
Ooh, very good. You got it.
Yeah, correct.
Oh, yeah.
Well done.
And it was funny as we were talking to him before the show, he told us like he really does not like public speaking. And we were like, well, that has to be
Oh,
the lie. But he actually said I think he was invited and then something happened and he ended up not being able to go. But
okay.
yeah, so good job.
Well done.
Yeah.
And now it's your turn. And so what we will do is have you give us your 3, and then we will reveal it on the next episode of the next tour.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So here are my 3. One is that we've lived in the United States, we've lived in Germany and Japan, all during his active duty time. Another one is we've moved 16 times over the last 27 years that he's been in. And the last one would be my husband and I met, and we were both midshipmen in Navy ROTC at Hampton University.
Wow. Well, you know what?
It's really
All of
fun.
those are incredibly plausible. But again, we'll make sure that our next guest has the opportunity to determine which one is the lie on our next episode. So, Attiyya, thank you so very much for being here. We really, really appreciate your insights, your expertise. And to our guests out there, again, do the homework, stay informed, get in touch with Attiyya, get in touch with a professional. We'll drop those resources in that we talked about during the show into the show notes. And if you could please, connect with Attiyya and make sure you get your taxes, you pay your taxes. They are certain. And moreover, follow us on YouTube, like us, comment, drop us, ideas for shows. Of course, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Visit our website, thenexttourpodcast.com. And of course, listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Audible. Yes, I have to read it because there's so much on here. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The Next Tour. See ya.
The views, opinions, and advice expressed by our guest on the next tour are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast, Andia, or any affiliated organizations. While we strive to provide helpful and accurate information, this podcast is for informational purposes only. We encourage listeners to consult with professionals or conduct their own research before making any significant decisions related to military transition or post-service life. The content is intended as guidance and personal perspective, not as official advice.